Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now we introduce our guest and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. In the eyes of society, to become a judge means one has achieved a position of high esteem and respect within the legal community. Because of the nature of the job, judges are expected to follow higher standards of conduct and act as a role model. Yet in the last few years, several judges have been indicted and even convicted of crimes. Today we're going to look at that agency that investigates complaints against judges. Our guests are Gerald Stern, Administrator of the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct, and the Honorable Gabriel Krausman, Justice of the Supreme Court, Kings County. Hello, Justice Krausman. Hello, Gerald.
Hi.
Gerald, tell us about the Commission. What is it?
The Commission receives complaints from all over the state about judges, and they may be town village justices, they may be full-time judges, but it's a statewide body. It's composed of 11 members who are appointed by the governor, the chief judge, and legislative leaders. And the Commission has a staff. I'm the head of the staff. And we receive complaints, we investigate some, dismiss the great majority, about 80% are dismissed because we don't have jurisdiction over a number of the claims that are made by people. And in appropriate cases, after investigation, hearings are scheduled, and a judge may eventually be removed from office, or publicly censured, or publicly admonished, or possibly privately cautioned by the Commission.
Well, Judge Krausman, you're one judge. How do the judges feel about this commission?
Well, there's no question that a commission such as this one is needed. The question is whether it's operating, and it's operating to its best possibility. I believe that there's no question at all that this commission is here to stay. Judges recognize that and know that it's going to be here. Whether it's operating to its optimum capacity, that's something that remains to be seen. Some judges believe it does, some believe it does not.
Well, I've heard criticism that it acts not only in the investigation stage, it receives the complaint, it acts as a prosecutor, and then it renders the decision all together.
Well, you know, there's a grain of truth in that, but that's an overstatement. The Commission has a full-time staff, and the staff does not get involved in making decisions. The staff has an investigative function, and in a sense prosecutes a case, but not in a criminal setting. And once charges are filed, then the Commission is separated from the staff, and vice versa, and the staff acts as counsel presenting evidence against the judge. But this is the nature of the system. It's the nature of most disciplinary systems.
We have one-tier and two-tier types of commissions. This is a one-tier commission. It passes constitutional mandate. It's been determined that that's not only allowable, but it's absolutely proper in this type of administrative type of agency. There's no question that it's allowable. Whether it's right or wrong, I find no fault with that. I really don't think there's enough of a break between the investigatory stage and the judicial stage so that I don't really find fault in that aspect of the Commission. I don't think most judges do.
Well, what area do most judges find fault with?
Well, in the nature of the complaints that the Commission does take, and the nature of what they find to be improper. There's a constitutional mandate. The Constitution determines what is cause for removal, and Mr. Stern, in his own wisdom, has determined that the administrative and the canons of judicial conduct are the only method by which you're going to remove a judge. There's a constitutional question and there's a Commission question as to what constitutes misconduct.
How do you feel about that?
Well, the standards of conduct are promulgated by the judiciary, not by the Commission. And it's the Commission and not staff that makes the vital decisions as to when to investigate, charge, and discipline. So the rules of conduct have been in existence for some 20 years, and it's the judges who have developed the rules which we enforce.
How does a complaint come to you? In what fashions?
It could come to us by someone who's been in court. It could come to us from an attorney. It could come through an anonymous source, which is a very sensitive subject.
You mean
among
you
judges.
can get a phone call from somebody who makes an outlandish statement, hangs up, and then what happens?
Well, under that situation, it would be dismissed. That's not a complaint. But if we get a written complaint from an anonymous source, the chances are we're not going to be able to do anything because we're missing the person who could provide the background and the substance of that complaint. On occasion, however, we could get a complaint that's anonymous that provides the documentation, even though we don't have the person who sent the complaint, and the judge could be removed from office. And the Commission removed a Supreme Court justice from Buffalo on an anonymous complaint because the anonymous complainant sent in the documentation showing the misconduct.
Well, let's take this one step at a time. You get the complaint, then what happens?
Well, it goes to the Commission. And out of
That's the 11 members.
Right.
I assume it's presented, but do you give the judge an opportunity to defend the position?
Well, it may be unnecessary because about 80% of those complaints are dismissed, and the complainant is advised that the Commission has dismissed the complaint. So it would be foolish to tell 1,100 judges immediately that we've received the complaint.
Well, one second. You use the term, you say 1,100 judges. How did you get that number?
1,100 complaints each year are received by the Commission. And
Well, there's only 3,500 judges in the state, isn't that correct?
That's a lot of judges.
There are 11, that's right. There are 3,500 judges, and we say judges, we're talking about two-thirds of them are town or village justices, the old justice of the peace. These are upstate.
But they still handle criminal matters
Oh,
and
yes.
misdemeanor matters and
Oh,
drunk
yes.
driving matters and
Sure.
speeding tickets.
Oh, yes, everything. Everything up through misdemeanors and some involvement in felony cases.
When do you notify the judge? At what stage that he's under some sort of investigation?
When the Commission wants to ask the judge a question. And the judge is asked certain questions, either in person or through the mail. The judge is given notice of the complaint and enough background so that the judge can answer the allegation.
So there may be an investigation going on without the judge being given an opportunity at the beginning stage, certainly, to respond to it.
Sure, that's correct, and that's the way it should be.
How do you feel
Absolutely.
about that?
I find no fault with that. If, in fact, there's an investigation, and it happens all the time in criminal cases also, I have no problem with that. What I'm concerned about is having the judge have all the rights that they're entitled to, due process rights, and the way the Commission has evolved. Initially, I really believed that there was a denial of due process rights. At this juncture, I think all the discovery material that anyone would get in a criminal case is given in this case. I have no fault with that at all. What I find fault with is the Commission taking the most minuscule and minor type of cases and building them up into some major
Well,
cases.
give me an example.
I'll give you the best one of all. We had instances where someone appeared at a fundraiser for an agency. They were the guests of the agency, and they were cited by the Commission, or letters were sent by the Commission asking why they were there because money was raised. They were the honorees of a specific agency. I'm not going to go into the specific case, but to me, that doesn't rise to judicial misconduct.
How do you
But the
answer that?
judiciary has stated that that's misconduct,
Well-
and all we can do is enforce the rules promulgated by the
Well,
judiciary.
the interesting thing is that we have, in this state, the hardest working judiciary in the country. 50% of all the sanctions in the country were handed down by New York State. We have 6% of the judges, 50% of the sanctions in the country were handed down by this Commission on Judicial Conduct. Why? Because other cases in which other states don't find misconduct, here they determine that's misconduct. There's no reason for
How do you
it.
answer
Well, the situation you're talking about, of course, is probably handled, and probably has been handled, by a private letter of caution telling the judge not to do it.
But in terms of the sanctions itself, public sanctions, the public sanctions itself, 50% of the sanctions in the entire United States, with 6% of the judges in New York State, because in the rest of the country, they don't believe that this is misconduct. Only in New York do
Yeah,
they
but
find
the
misconduct.
situation you just gave was not a basis for public discipline. We do have other cases in which judges are publicly disciplined, removed, censured, and publicly admonished.
The major sanctions in the country are in New York State. The American Judicial Society publishes a reporter, and it hands down the sanctions handed down by everyone in the country, New York State, the most. Why? It may say that you're doing the best job. It also may mean that you're doing more than you should, in which other states don't have it as a sanction. New York State makes it a
Jerry,
sanction.
we'll let you answer that right after this break. We have to go to it. You're watching Lawline. Stay with us. Lawyers, like medical specialists, limit their practice to certain areas of the law. At our firm, Zalman & Schnorman, we specialize in personal injury litigation. We concentrate on helping injury victims receive fair compensation, and there is no charge for our legal services unless we are successful. If you are too injured to come to our office, we will come to see you. At Zalman & Schnorman, we care about you.
And now a word from the American Lung Association. Your lungs are an incredible piece of machinery, but your lungs are also incredibly delicate. Diseases of the lung are among the most frequent causes of suffering, disability, and death in the United States. Lung cancer is now the #1 cancer killer in America among both men and women. Chronic bronchitis and emphysema are marked by chronic obstruction to the airflow. Among chronic diseases, asthma is the leading cause of school absenteeism. Yes, TB is still with us. In the past year, over 22,000 Americans have contracted TB. Lung trouble can come from the air you breathe at work, but thanks to the American Lung Association, you can breathe a little easier. They're working to fight all this lung disease. Your lungs are a miracle. Take care of your lungs. They're only human. And if my lungs weren't in great shape, I couldn't have said all this. The American Lung Association. The Christmas seal people.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today's topic, we're talking about the Commission on Judicial Conduct. That's the commission that investigates and prosecutes judges. Our guests are Gerald Stern, the administrator of the commission, and Judge Gabriel Krausman, Supreme Court judge for Kings County. Jerry, you were just about to say before the break regarding the response to the judge who felt that your commission was bringing more cases than almost any other state in the union.
I mean, they're minor cases.
I understand. But
Well,
how do you respond to that?
Every state has a commission. There are about 5 or 6 that are doing anything. The great majority of commissions throughout the country are not funded, they're not well funded, and they're not doing a thing. They're not serving the public in those states. Of the 5 or 6 that are doing anything, I must tell you they're not well funded. We're adequately funded. And the fact is that...
Whichever you're the most funded, because you
Yes.
get more money than anyone else, any commission in the state. You get, last year, I think this year,
Well-
$2.5 million. That's more than any commission in the entire country. Right.
Of this kind.
I understand,
Sure.
but
That's
getting
the way
back-
it should be.
I believe
Well,
Judge,
that's what you believe.
Judge Krausman is trying to imply, if I'm correct, that you're more aggressive than you should
No,
be.
what I believe they're doing is they bring these actions to justify getting the money they're getting. That's
Well,
one of the that's one of the arguments that we've made before. In other words, well, that may be nonsense, but you get a lot of money, you have to show that you're doing something for that money. Therefore, you
But
bring these
you
actions.
don't know that.
Oh, I don't know that. I'm
Right.
just
Right.
guessing at that, but
Yeah.
it's a guess that a lot of people have.
We also have 3,500 judges in this state. No other state has anything like that number.
California
The
has
state of California
2,000.
has 11. No, there are 1,160 judges in the state of
Well,
California.
when you talk about it, aside from the village and town judges, how many do you have besides them?
Oh, 1,100, but
11.
two-thirds of our cases involve the town and village justices.
Jerry, now, after the investigation stage, and you've given I assume, the judge an opportunity to, let's assume, respond in writing or provide any evidence, do you have a hearing? Do you have a trial?
Yes, in those instances in which the commission decides that there should be a hearing because there's a potential for public discipline, then a hearing must be provided before a referee who's designated by the commission, and my staff
Is that referee usually a former judge, or?
Could be a former judge. About 30 to 40% of the cases involve referees who are former judges.
Okay. Now, of the 1,100 on the average complaints that you receive a year, how many actually reach this trial stage?
Oh, about 25, maybe 30.
And does the commission act as a prosecutor at the...
The staff does. The commission at that point, having designated the referee, sits back and waits for the report of the referee. But it's the staff that acts in the nature of a prosecutor within a disciplinary setting.
So I'm not confused now. The commission originally acts, would I say, almost like a grand jury. They decide whether or not the matter is going to be brought before them?
Well, you could say that, yes.
And once they decide whether or not it should have a hearing, then they determine whether or not sanctions are warranted or not.
Yes, correct.
And that's with the opportunity that they allow the judge. I assume the judge is allowed representation.
Oh, of course.
And discovery.
Full due process, yes.
Now, what happens with the decision? What type of decision can this commission render?
Well, they can remove a judge subject to review in the highest court of the state, the Court of Appeals, or censure or publicly admonish a judge, again, subject to review in the Court of
Well, but
Appeals.
nobody's going to take an appeal after what the Court of Appeals did. What they did is that when the Commission recommended in 2 cases censure, they took up the appeal and the Court of Appeals removed the judges. So at this juncture, anyone who advised a judge to go up on appeal after a sanction of admonition or censure would be disbarred.
Well, it shows that the Commission was too lenient in those cases.
Well, it shows that sometimes the Court of Appeals has been acting a little too strictly in some of
first-
these cases. Although, by the way, they can do just the opposite. They can lessen the sanction, and that's been done also.
Sure.
Well, what does censure mean?
Censure is a public condemnation. It does not bar a judge from presiding. It has no other effect on the judge, but it is a public condemnation.
Slap of the hands?
I don't think it's regarded as a slap on the
Not by the judiciary.
Yeah, right.
How is it regarded?
It's the highest type of admonition absent removal, and the highest type of finding absent removal. Admonition is a lesser type.
Well,
of
is a
sanction.
censure part of the permanent record of that particular judge?
Yes, it is.
And if he goes for certification, is that taken into consideration?
Could be.
I would expect that it's considered.
Could be.
Yes.
It could be.
Right.
And what if a judge receives more than 1 censure? If he receives 2 censures and 3?
It hasn't happened.
Oh, yes. Well, it has in the state. Yeah.
Well, more than likely it'll be removal. If there was a subsequent censure, I would imagine it would lead more towards removal rather than... They operate and add it all up, where if you were censured more than once, they look at your whole record, and the odds on you being removed would be much greater if you had been censured before.
Well, can you be censured twice?
It can be. It's happened once or twice. And as the judge indicates, if a judge is censured and then comes up again on charges and they're sustained, the judge might well be removed.
So you have censure, you have removal. Anything else?
Well, there's a lesser form of public condemnation called a
Admonition.
public admonition. And then there's a private caution, which is advice or warning to a judge not to do what the judge did in the first
By the way,
instance.
they can use that against you later on if you called before them. On another case, they can use the private admonition, they can bring it up at a subsequent period of time. Even though a case has been dismissed and you're privately given a private letter of caution, they can use that at a subsequent period of time. Most states don't do that. New York does.
Well, I'm not sure that's so. And I must tell you this.
According to the American Judicial Society, most 36 states don't do it, and only 14 do.
I can't believe that a state will allow the Commission to privately caution or privately admonish a judge and disregard that if the judge repeats the misconduct. I can't believe that. But I must tell you this, that if the judge engages in the same conduct again, in order to use the prior caution, we have to charge the conduct. So we prove it in a due process setting before a referee.
What if it was a different type of case and it happened like 8 or 9 years ago? It wasn't the same type of
It won't be
misconduct.
considered. It really will not be considered.
Well,
We do-
according to the rules, it could be considered. According to the rules that you send out, it could be considered. I read those rules.
No, I don't think so, but there may have been a change. And,
Oh, maybe
yeah,
the
right.
last rules I read, it could have been.
So there's no confusion, and the public understands this. In 2 cases which you brought up, Judge Krausman, the Commission censured the judge. He appealed it. They appealed it to the Court of Appeals, which is the proper process, and the Court of Appeals said censure is not enough, and they removed the judge.
That's right. And that's
Right.
and by the same token, by the way, to give the devil its due, when the Commission asked for removal and it was an appeal, they had a public censure rather than removal. That happened in a case in Nassau County too. So
The
I mean,
court has done
it's
both.
Both
right.
things.
They've raised the sanction and lowered the sanction.
But there's a Damocles sword hanging on any judge who takes an appeal if there's a public admonition or a censure. You just can't take that appeal anymore. You just can't take the chance of being removed based on what happened in those cases.
Do you find, is that your experience, most judges are not appealing?
I think most judges who are publicly admonished or censured will not seek review in the Court of Appeals.
What are the most common complaints you get about judges?
Well, demeanor, bad demeanor on the bench is one complaint. Probably the single largest category is rudeness to litigants and others.
Can a judge be censured for rudeness?
Yes, judge can be and perhaps should be, especially if there's a pattern.
Give me an example. What constitutes rudeness as opposed to maybe maintaining a stern courtroom without any pun?
Right. A judge can, of course, be firm in his or her courtroom and demand certain things from the attorneys and the witnesses, and that's perfectly appropriate, and we have nothing to do with that. But if a judge screams at people, litigants, witnesses, lawyers, if a judge is irascible, and it's a sufficiently serious problem, and it happens more than once, that judge probably, if it's reported to the Commission, will be investigated for bad demeanor.
Well, let me
Just
give you, with all due respect, I think that one of the big pluses of the Commission, and again, I think that I haven't found a lot of things that are unfavorable, but one of the favorable aspects of the Commission is that we've done away with some of the horrors. I practiced law 20 years ago, in which we had judges that were monstrosities. I mean, they were Martinez, they operated courtrooms in the most horrific type of ways. We rarely see that today, and we've had instances in days gone by in which some of the judges operated as their own personal fiefdoms. We don't see that at all anymore, and maybe that's one of the pluses of the Commission. That I really believe that has operated in the pluses of the judiciary. The fact that the Commission is there, judges don't operate in the fashion that some of them had years ago. And believe it or not, I can give you horror stories in the 60s, and when I practiced law, we had some judges no longer on the bench, no longer alive, that were just tyrants. And we really don't see that anymore in New York State and anywhere in the country.
Well, Judge Krausen, speaking with your colleagues, do they always keep the, and I'm going to use the term because I've heard it from judges, the Stern Commission in mind?
You always have to worry. That's one of the difficulties you have today, is that people used to tell us that they're not taking an appeal, they're going to make their appeals on 2nd Avenue. At one time, there was a real fear of that. I don't think there's that fear anymore. I think that we're not operating to that extent with the fear that was there when the Commission initially was started. I think that they've grown to some extent, and the judiciary has grown. We are the hardest working judiciary in the country. We really do better than almost anybody, yet we are tarred with an image of being corrupt or venal as a result of the amount of sanctions that we have as against the entire country.
Jerry, I'm going to ask you what some of the other complaints, common complaints against judges right after this break. You're watching Lawline. Stay with us.
My father taught me to steal and to pitch. Today I struck out 7 and stole home. I think Dad would have been proud. Coach was. He said he wished Dad had taken as good care of himself as he did of me and Billy. Billy won't talk about it, and Mom can't stop crying. I don't know what it's like to have a heart attack, except I can see it hurts. It hurts bad.
You can help prevent heart disease. We can tell you how.
If you are injured in an automobile or any type of accident, you may have the right to fair compensation for injuries, pain, and suffering, including loss of wages. So if an accident leaves you disabled or unable to return to your job, put our law firm, Zalman & Schnorman, to work for you. There is no charge for our legal services unless your case is settled or won. Call Zalman & Schnorman, who is specialist in personal injury litigation.
My father, Gordon McCrae, was one of the biggest stars in musicals. He was also an alcoholic. When I was little, I thought I could stop my dad from drinking. But only the alcoholic can do that. And finally, my father got help and stayed sober the last 7 years of his life. I was so proud of him. Alcoholism is treatable and preventable. Be alert to signs that you might need help, especially if you're the child of an alcoholic. For information, call the National Council on Alcoholism, 1-800-NCA-CALL.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today we're talking about the Commission on Judicial Conduct. That's the commission who investigates and removes judges if that conduct is necessary. Our guests are Gerald Stern, the administrator of the commission, and Judge Gabriel Krausman, Supreme Court, Kings County. Jerry, you were just about to tell me what some other common complaints against judges are.
Well, in addition to the demeanor subject, racial comments, of course, would not be tolerated in the state. Gender bias statements would not be tolerated. There are a number of situations in which a judge should not handle a case, and the judge does handle a case. Some of those may involve misconduct. There's the off-the-bench situation, a judge who engages in some conduct that reflects adversely on the judicial office, the high judicial office, may find that the judge is under investigation.
Is a judge allowed to have a business outside of judgeship?
Now, a full-time judge should not engage in any form of business except to manage his or her own investments. It's all right to invest, but a judge can't operate or manage a business.
Can you own real estate?
You can own real estate.
You can't
but
actively manage it.
Right, you can't actively manage any business. And of course, judges sometimes do, and that certainly consists of conduct that we get involved in.
What happens when an attorney, let's assume, doesn't get an adjournment from a judge, and he feels that the judge's demeanor is wrong? Do you file papers, or what
Well,
happens?
the decision not to grant an adjournment is none of our business. The demeanor is a separate issue. It depends what happens. It may be that a complaint will be made, and we'll look into it and find that there was nothing to it and dismiss it.
Do you ever just send letters to judges saying that it's come to our attention that you're perhaps not treating women fairly in your courtroom, and maybe you should take a course on gender bias or something of that nature? And I know they're given, by the way.
Well, the Commission will caution judges in a number of situations. Gender bias happens to be a serious matter, and if the investigation determines that there was gender bias, it may well be something more than a letter of caution. But there are many instances in which the Commission will just privately caution a judge as a warning of sorts, to tell the judge to be careful.
When does your role stop, and let's assume a local prosecutor's role start?
Well, we may well get the results of an investigation by a prosecutor. A judge may be acquitted in a criminal proceeding, and the Commission will still have jurisdiction because of the misconduct involved. Or we may start an investigation, find that there's criminal conduct, and refer it to a prosecutor.
Well, Judge Crossan, wasn't there a case recently?
There's a different burden of proof with respect to the criminal aspect in this type of proceeding. There was a case, and I don't want to go into, we really shouldn't go into specific cases.
But the judge was innocent?
Well, the judge was found innocent in a criminal court and was subsequently removed. But again, the different questions arose. He was... Well, I don't want to go into the
Let me
case.
ask you this.
It was an
If I gave you the ability to suggest changes or enact changes to the Commission, what would you do?
Well,
in the moment we have
first of all, I believe that the people on the Commission are there too long. Most of the non-judges and lawyers have been there too long. They've been there from the beginning. Some of them have been there 12 and 14 and 15 years. Some of the lawyers have been there for too long a period of time.
New blood.
I really believe that. The judges have changed. I think some of the other members should change. And I think the way the Commission is set up, 4 members are selected by the governor, 3 members by the chief judge of the Court of Appeals, and 1 by each of the
I
legislative
just have
leaders.
to let you respond to that in the moment we have left.
He can't say that's his boss.
No, absolutely. But I think continuity is important. The members have done an excellent job. There's no reason for change.
Judge Krausman, thank you very much. Gerald Stern, the administrator of the Commission on Judicial Conduct, thank you very much for appearing on Law Line.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Law Line.
Alan, you've done a great job.
You have been watching Law Line with your host, New York trial attorney, author and lecturer, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions or comments about this week's program, please write to Law Line, 27th floor, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005.